And we're live. Hi, everyone. Welcome back. We are at episode 7. I have my experts here with me. Episode 7 of the Build Your Presence Online for Building Inspectors. You know what? You have missed a lot, but we're going to have all this in the replay. You can go back and see it over here. I'm Mia Voss. We have Jeff Bond with Inspect.com, the founder.
Hi there, everyone. How are you?
And the club president, right?
Secretary.
Yes, that's me. And then Ammon Johns is our marketing expert, and he has been throwing down the amazing information. Now, listen, we've been kind of romancing you up until this point, but now we're really going to get into the dirty nitty gritty of how to get your presence online. And you're going to be getting some information that most people pay a ton of money for. I'm just going to put it out there. So, gentlemen, are you ready to get started?
So ready, always.
Okay, so the title of today, I had to take notes because it's General Practices for the Semantic Web. If you don't know what that is, you're going to know within the next half an hour, right, guys?
Oh, yeah.
I'm not sure if I'll ever know.
I know. I'm still, when we were just talking about it in the green room of what we think is what people can walk away with this. So again, this is episode 7. So we have led up to, we've done all of these episodes in the order of how you can build your online presence. You don't want to skip any steps. We're going to put those links back here in the comments below, but we are going to jump in and get started. So here we go. Again, this is your Grow Your Online Presence series for home inspectors. Oh, we're at episode 6. I just jumped ahead. Act like I said 6 earlier. General Practices for the Semantic Web. And here we go. All right, here's our overview, Semantics of Semantics. We're going to say that a lot. We could turn this into a drinking game, gentlemen. We truly could. Entities, Disambiguation, that one took me a bit to learn how to pronounce, and Schema. All of these words, I generally don't know what they mean, but we're going to get into it. So starting with the Semantics of Semantics, Semantic Search, and the Semantic Web. Ammon, what's all that mean?
Okay. This is the reason that we're covering this, really, is if you're going to be talking to a developer about, building a website for yourself today, in this day and age, if you're already, working with a website and you're going to be working on SEO, you're going to hear about semantic search, you're going to hear about the semantic web, you're going to hear a lot with this word semantic in it. And they're not all the same thing, and you need to know a few things, or it's all going to go way over your head and confuse you, and you're going to end up paying for things you don't need. There are 2 major different things. One is semantic search, and the other is the semantic web, and they are not the same thing.
They're not even really
search.
Yeah.
Go on, Jeff.
I was going to just say, this is probably like one of the biggest confusion points I had is that they have the same word, and so you might want to associate they're kind of the same thing, and they are completely different. I'm going to enjoy this and learn again by listening well.
Oh, it gets even worse than that in SEO, because in SEO, there is this old mythical technology, latent semantic indexing, and people have found papers on this and think, oh, it's got the word semantic in it, so it must be all about semantic search. This is the secret sauce. No, it's actually from the 80s. It predates the web. It's no use for the web at all. Latent semantic indexing was a way of building an index based on the uniqueness of words and what words were in the documents. If you add one single document, you have to rebuild the whole index around it. So it's useless for the web. It's never been used for the web. And anytime anybody tries to sell you anything with latent semantic analysis or latent semantic indexing mentioned, they're a charlatan. They have no clue what they're talking about. Walk away from that idiot fast.
It's the dynamics of the internet and the computing that's made all this new smart semantic really relevant. Also the interconnectedness of the network, or no?
Partly. Let's get down to brass tacks here. Semantic just means meaning. And semantics is the study of the meaning of words. It's related to other things. There is a field called proxemics, and that's about the meaning of the relationship in distance between things. You know how downtown you've got a lot of the top restaurants, and you'll have some of the bars because people go from the restaurant to the bar, and there'll be some theatres often, and there'll be restaurants near the theatres because people want to eat before or after they go to. Right, that's proxemics, understanding that those things have deliberately placed each other, placed near to each other. There is a meaning there and a lot of understanding. Anyway, semantics is the meaning.
I like that. Now that made sense to me when you put it into those terms. I go, okay, I get that. Because I do think, Ammon, and I didn't even realize this before, people just take that one word and it becomes this one size fits all. And clearly not. I literally just typed in there, say no to latent semantic indexing. So
absolutely. And just think of semantic as a bit like the word context. Context, we know what it means. It means the meaning of something changing according to what's around it. How we know what we mean by what circumstances it was said in, what surrounds it. Right. And semantics just means the meaning of the word itself. That's it. So
Gotcha.
A semantic web is a different thing to semantic search. Semantic search, you're going to have to worry about, but not much, because Google's doing that. Google's doing all the hard work. You just need to know enough of it to understand that Google is trying to understand what the searcher meant, not just what words they used. Once upon a time, Google just matched the query string that you put in with the words on the page. That was all it could do. And then, they started to look at whether those words were in links. But what if I've said palace and I meant house? Or I've said theatre and I meant cinema?
Right.
What's the difference? Well, Google is trying to work that out now. It tries to understand that when you say restaurant, you may also include diner, you may include pizzeria, you may include lots of other things than just restaurant.
So basically Google's like, do you really mean that?
Yeah, exactly that. It's trying to get around the fact that we all have, we all have our own ways of speaking, our own preferences, partly based on what we like, partly based on our society, and different people can use very different words for the same thing.
It's interesting. We always hear these words matter. And they try to nail you down to certain words, and you're just realizing here that's just kind of maybe make them popularized, but that doesn't make them right necessarily. It just maybe makes them proportionally or in some percentage more commonly used. But the idea is to get the true intent of the meaning through more than the word is the meaning is what you're really trying to get to. Yeah.
Now, where that plays into what somebody needs to know when they're writing their blog, writing their website, if you've got inspector on your page, you've probably also got inspectors and inspections. You've got it in context, home inspection. These are all things that are giving context and therefore semantic meaning to those words. And therefore it knows you're not a gynecologist doing a gynecological inspection. This matters. There are a lot of different kinds of inspections you don't do. You're not going to check people's tickets. So using the words to give Google the context, to give it the ability to pick the right searches that relate to your content rather than other kinds of inspections, that matters to you. That bit you need to know. But that's common sense.
It is, but it's things that people just don't think about. And we were talking about even with some folks that you've been speaking to on some website stuff, I think all of us tend to overcomplicate it and not just very simply use the words that we need to, right?
Yeah.
And just to clarify, Ammon, really quick, this is mainly in discussion with regards to website development, correct? Because I know that like in ads, sometimes as we go in and we actually go home inspection and we go home inspector and we go home inspections and we'll create different keyword combos and match phrases because at that point, what we're trying to do is play a different game than what we're driving for here on our website. So is that an accurate statement to make?
Yes. Yes, okay. And also the ads work on a different algorithm. They're not based on the same understanding as the main search of Google.
So make sure, home inspectors, that you understand that the way you dance on your website is different than the way you play the game in your ads campaign, and they're closely related. But in certain cases, you can count on Google doing the heavy lifting, especially on the website. But in your ads campaign, especially, you need to do the heavy lifting.
Yeah.
Sure. And that's a really great piece of information to arm folks with, even if they're not doing the work. You know, that's what happens. We've talked about it a million times of a lot of inspectors or a lot of people in general that just want to do their business. They don't know enough to run that, but they also don't know enough what to ask, and they end up getting charged a ton of money and they don't have the right questions to ask. So that's a really good distinction too, of the difference between your web and the web design and your ad campaign.
And the web will punish you once, you know, and hopefully not too bad, but the ads campaign will punish you each month. So don't miss out there. Sorry to interrupt Ammon on that, but
that's money. That's money right there, Jeff. So that's a great. Okay, good.
Okay,
Yay.
so we know roughly what semantic search is. So I'll quickly cover what the semantic web is so that people know they can ignore it and why. The semantic web is much more about the different kinds of devices that are connecting. You may be aware that now you can buy refrigerators that are aware of what stock is in them and can automatically order top-ups of things you run out of.
Wine. Sorry.
Yeah.
It knows you well.
That requires the semantic web. That requires standardized meanings, standardized semantics so that different devices can understand each other. Now, that plays into the web a little bit, because of apps and the ability for machines to read our sites. And to a very small extent, that applies to search. But the whole point of a search engine like Google is they don't want to be dependent on you writing it specifically for them to understand. Google wants to be able to understand it whether you've made that effort or not, because they want to index everything. So the semantic web is not as important for people. And when we're talking about things like Schema later, these are much more to do with semantic web and less to do with semantic search. There's a little bit of crossover, but mostly that's about the semantic web.
I think that could be just a show in itself, just this segment, because I think that's really going to take a lot of
it's a career.
Yeah, and it's just something that people don't think about, but I think it's an easy thing to get once you hear it.
Yeah.
Definitely. All right.
Now, one place they do cross over a little bit is entities. And this is the idea of clearly identifying which thing we're talking about. I gave a couple of examples when we were preparing this show. And, one of the most obvious is if I search for Jaguar, I could mean the car, I could mean the sports team, I could mean the big cat, and there's lots of others as well. And which one I'm going to have to guess as a search engine by which other words I might have put in there with it, or on what I've searched for in the past and what the search engine knows about my history, which it gets complicated fast. That's partly why it needs to know entities, because then it can separate the results. What Google will do in a situation like that is it will try and show different results for each of the possible meanings it knows of. So it will try to show a couple that relate to the Jaguar cars and a few that relate to the football teams and some that relate to the animals, and then allow the user to pick, because that's the only way it can be sure.
But I'm hearing you say too, is in watching your prior searching, is if your past half hour's worth of history is all about cars and British vehicles and so on, then you're telling me that the Google algorithm probably has a probability is that like those results for the Jaguar car are going to kind of percolate near the top, because it's going to have been kind of intelligent about watching what you're doing, and it's going to be figuring and working towards what you're trying to figure out and helping you figure it out.
Yeah, and one of the really interesting things is that now Google recognizes when you're talking about a specific entity and how other entities relate to them. That's the cool thing about entities, is it has this database of relationships between entities. So if I say, who was the last president in the White House, it understands that the White House is in America. It understands that the president in the White House must therefore mean the American president. It knows the last one was Obama. If I then do a follow-up search, how tall is his wife? Even though I haven't said Obama, I haven't said president, I haven't said, it knows that relates to the previous search, and it will give me Michelle Obama's height.
Interesting. Yeah.
Good stuff.
Yeah, it can be creepy to some folks, right? But it is pretty convenient when when it's learned that's that learned behavior.
Yeah. And all of that came about through semantic search and the way that Google has what it calls a knowledge graph, which is where it builds up this idea of entities and how they relate to each other.
Gotcha.
Okay, so entities. Mr. Agarwal at Google described it best when he said that they were moving to things, not strings. Remember, I said originally what it had was a string of characters, and it just tried to match anything else that had that string of characters. Back in the 90s, that was pretty much how all search engines worked. Now it's trying to understand what the thing is itself, to recognize what we're talking about and how the words relate to actual concepts.
I think that's the difference too. It sounds like between when you think about it, even someone learning, it's like it's learning a new language, right? You can hear things that are is spelled the exact same way but pronounced completely differently. So that distinction is really getting to be quite it's prevalent. That's neat.
And also, it's helping us. Sometimes you mistype something and Google automatically corrects you.
Yep.
If you've accidentally written soap when you meant soup, it will usually be able to tell from the other queries
Or even the words that are with it, right?
Yes, exactly.
The context.
It knows that
French vanilla
don't go
soap
together.
versus soup, right? Do you mean soap? They'll ask you that too. Kind of like, is this what you mean? Which has been very handy at times as well. That does speed up your search. And then again, if it's learning that algorithm of like you said, Jeff, you asked like if you have searched Jaguars, for half an hour on different things, and then you come back the next day and do the same thing again. Again, that's going to start learning what that is.
Yeah.
What your query is. Gotcha.
And that's handy. I know I heard you say the handy creepy factor, and it is, but I know that, like, for example, exactly what you're saying is I mistype a word, misspell it, and it populates up what I'm actually looking for. And and then I go back and I check on an incognito, and if I type it right and it's not there, and I'm going, wow, this thing acted, when I misspelled the word, I got what I wanted. And when I spelled it right, I didn't, because there was probably a lot more that were exactly related to it that was maybe kind of bringing it down. So it is handy.
Yeah. And then to go back to ads, just real quickly, I haven't had a chance to tell you this, Jeff. Once again, the Inspect.net, which is Jeff's company, showed up for me again. This one was on my phone, by the way. I wanted to let you know that too. That
second one today.
Yeah. Yep.
You're the second person.
Am I okay? Because it's very, and that's the target. That's the ads that Jeff is mentioning.
Those are free. I don't mind saying to you really quick, since you mentioned those are free for me. It's just an impression, cost nothing. It's part of a remarketing campaign. So it's even less expensive. It's like 7 cents a click. It's top of mind. It's just I want you to know that I'm out there. And as Imran says, it's just to let you know that when you need me, I'm here for you.
It's very comforting because I know you. I'm like, oh, there's Jeff.
It's a little personal though. It's the way that it's so effective. Is I understand that component, but it really is just a way of letting people know. I really care about our relationship, and I know I'm knocking on your door, but I'm just letting you know I'm here. I'm still here. Yep, top of mind.
Exactly. All right. So are we at this one, or did we cover? All right, we are.
Let me just quickly go back to entity extraction, because that's one thing we really ought to cover. And what Google's doing here is it's learning about these relationships on its own, and it's looking for the times that things are mentioned together, and when it does, it can recognize this entity keeps getting mentioned with this, but it also gets mentioned with that, and how they relate to each other. Now, where that matters to an inspector is, it understands that the area you serve is an entity, it's a place, and where it is and what it's in relation to. And it understands that inspections are a service. And that one's important, because when you do searches for services on Google, it treats those searches slightly different to other ones. When I search for plumber and any town, it will automatically go to a much more localized search. But I also, if I just search for I need a plumber, Google knows that it's almost certainly going to be one within my region. It's learned from the way that people do searches. It knows that plumber is a service and they usually operate within a radius, so it will automatically narrow down towards localized results. So if you're doing well in Google Local, that's when it will help you more.
I was just about to ask with Google Local and the maps and Google My Business, but do you have any idea for radius size that these are set to? Is like, do you think they operate probably in about 100-mile radius, or do you think that's even based on the metro area where you are? Whereas if an inspector is in a densely populated like New York, then that radius might be 5 miles, and if you're in the middle of Oklahoma, it might be 100 miles. Is that kind of dynamic kind of
I think it's going to be homing in on your region as closely as possible to get a full set of results. And I think it's going to depend on how many results is getting how big that radius will be, because they want to offer plenty of options. And that's the easiest way for the machine to scale it.
Yeah, got it.
It doesn't then have to know whether the area you're talking about is a small town or a big city, even though it's learning that. The way it's learning that is it's looking for how many results. If a place only has 5 plumbers, it's probably not as big as a place that's got 80 plumbers.
My mind goes back to the 7-pack, to the 5-pack, to the 3-pack, and you know, just that whole concept of condensing down the amount of results that show on maps and searches and things, and down to 3 right now.
Yeah,
be the top 3 for sure.
And again, it can change over time as people's behaviors change.
That's a really good case. Sorry, Mia, really quick but like that's a really good case for having a strong, just like you always mention, Mia, is the Google My Business presence as it relates to maps, because a lot of people start their search on maps and they start it on Google. So just dig your energy in right there, because that's where you're going to get best bang for the buck. And so I was going to just compliment you for that, Mia.
Not hearing you there, Mia. I don't know why.
Oh, it's because I was muted. I was drinking my water over here. I appreciate that, Jeff, because that's exactly what I was going to say. And what I want to remind anybody that's how we work here, folks. You're seeing the magic happen. But this is what's really important about keeping your Google My Business updated right now, especially during the pandemic, is people aren't sure if you're even around. Are you in business? So make sure you're looking at your hours and are updating your hours. Even I still love that you can do even posts on there, like a social post to say, yes, we're still in business, or we have this going on, and let people know you're still active. Because I know right now when I get on Google Maps, I'm just not sure who's around, right?
Yeah.
So staying active is really important.
And, don't forget to update listings, ads, and things like that with simple things like, look, if you email people your reports, mention that you're a contact-free service, because right now, that's a selling point.
Boom.
Wow.
That was,
yes.
Yeah. Oh, that was a good one. We're both
Thank
like,
you.
Make a note to self. Yeah. Exactly. So what your hours are, if you're still in business, what you're doing to respond to this pandemic. So yes, contact free. It's amazing. And it gives everybody that sense of security and safety, which we all need right now.
Yeah.
Right.
So
that makes me want to hire somebody just for that. All right.
Let's get on to the next one. Disambiguation.
Here we go. Let's see what this is all about.
Huh?
Right. Now, it's a great big word, but what we're doing is that thing of telling the difference between which kind of Jaguar we're talking about. We're saying, when... If I've got a guy I've just hired on my thing, and his name happens to be Brad Pitt, and we all have a laugh about it, and he's not actually Brad Pitt, the actor, Google might make a mistake. How do we know that this isn't going to happen? Well, it's going to be looking at the kind of information about them. The fact that this guy's listed as an inspector working at your firm is going to be a big one. The fact that he's, not in LA, the fact that all of these different things help with disambiguation. But this is also going back to what we were saying about inspections. There are all kinds of inspections you do not do, and helping Google understand which kind of inspections you do is a big help to you. Google is trying to do that, and just you giving it any help you can with disambiguation is going to help it send you better customers.
So that's the consistency piece that we're thinking of, and being consistent about your message, what you're putting out there. We've said this a million times if you've been watching this entire series, of being very clear and that having, in a way, the sense of boundaries of this is what I do, this is where I go, this is where I don't go. And so you're right, that consistency is huge.
Yeah. And also with the consistency, we all have our idiosyncratic ways of talking about what we do, presenting our services and things like that. And that's fine. But again, be consistent. Consistency in most things helps people adapt to you. If they're trying to adapt to you and you keep changing, that can actually be more confusing for them. So disambiguation is about giving them that co-occurrence so that they can see other things and work out your meaning. You're giving context to it, but also being consistent in that terminology throughout so that people can learn that's exactly what he means by this.
I got to ask you then, so you have a system, a method as an inspector, and I'm a phone guy. I give great phone, or I'm all email, and that's all I do is don't call me, is whatever it is. And a client runs into you and they really force you to work to their system, and it turns out they're texters and that's all they do. And so it doesn't fit into anything you do.
Right.
What's up with the mishmash with trying to solve that? Because it's sometimes for me, it's created almost more pain and pulls me out. And then I feel like I'm almost like being power played. It's just like, and because I know that the method I have, it works best for my system, and they know it too, but there's a real, I'm trying to just deal with that consistency, but they're not playing along with that. What do you do with that? That's a business problem more than probably
that's
a website.
Much more of a business problem than a marketing problem. You've already got that customer before they've been a hassle to you.
They were referred to me.
You've got to decide whether the extra hassle that this is adding by taking you out of your comfort zone is a problem. And if it is, do I charge more for this? Do I make it clear that that isn't what I want to do? It's a marketing decision at the business level. It's a strategic decision, and how you go about dealing with that. It could be you do a surcharge that you'll do. This is your format, and your other formats will entail this surcharge. And that way, if they take you out your comfort zone, you're laughing because they're paying another $20 an hour for it.
Right, you're getting paid to meet somebody at a space where you don't work your best. Now, I will say there's probably a couple things you can do as well, which is I've noticed when I've called someone, which is always cracks up. Yeah, you can tell how old I am because I have my younger friends and I'm like, dear God, please don't ever call me again. Text me or do anything else. Smoke signal, they'd be happier than for me to actually, and especially that with a cord, that would probably send them right over the edge. But when I've listened to people's voicemail and they will say, text or email me is best. And I listen to that. I do pay attention because that lets me know I may not be hearing back from them. So I think that is something you can build into your emails, into your voicemail, and anything like that to set that example or set that way. This is the way it's going to be. And then you can have that conversation and decide, hey, just for you, yes, it could be text, but you're letting them know and having that expectation already. You may not get what you need from me because I've been very clear up front.
Yeah, exactly that.
I appreciate all that input. Sorry to distract from that, but that's just...
no, it's a good distinction.
It's on the mind, boss.
I tend to like doing business via email because it also leaves a record. It's much easier to keep track of.
Oh, yes. I agree. There's very rarely, I do like it if somebody's calling me and I don't know who that number is, I let it go to voicemail because I do want a record. And then I also want to be able to respond and react. Right? How it is. It could be an asking for a quote. It could be, something. And if I could hear what that request is, the worst is when somebody says, just give me a call back. I'm like, dang it. I have no advantage of that, but I agree. Yes. And I agree in business. I do think that documenting things, it's litigious times, folks. So I feel you on that.
If there is a preferred way, it can be worth mentioning that when you're talking about your service, how you tend to work, that's a good piece of content to have on your site anyway. Mm-hmm. But also mention that there are flexible options available if that's not what suits them. Because ultimately, you're in a service business and serving the customer is what counts.
Correct.
True. So I think you can get the combination of that as well, especially with inspectors. It's hard. We're busy. You know, you could be under a building.
There's a lot going on.
There's there's a lot going on for sure, which is why, real quick, Jeff, you talked about with your contact form. Like that's been tremendous for you on your website. You're able to gather a lot of folks just simply through the contact form.
But for a more important reason to me, is that because it's like every single time as I get into inspection, I am 100% engaged and focused. It's like it's me and that house, and we're having a personal relationship for a couple hours, and everything else is distraction. And the phone or the text and the message takes you completely out of that zone. And it takes a while to get the game face back on. And it really, at least for my process, is the way I do this is I found that like it actually kind of, it robs from the quality of the job I do. And, you know, my job is to do the best job for the client. And anything that I do that I can to make sure that just happens is I feel it's incumbent upon me to do it. So I do that.
That's a bigger social issue almost too. So.
And on that, you know, this goes back to something we were saying before, but if you're in an area of the world where people like to use the phone, they like to talk a lot, and you're going to be out of easy contact for a lot of the time, make sure you set up your website for them to book a call. Because it lets them know a particular time. You can set an hour when you are able to call them.
Good info. Yeah.
That makes them comfortable. They can do the method of talking that they're comfortable with. And it's not costing them because you're calling them. And it just can make a lot of difference to how many leads you get.
Sure. They feel heard and in control. Because nothing's worse than clicking on a website, clicking through, and you're like, did you hear that? You know, did anybody hear that? Because you don't even get an acknowledgement of that message went through. So great
that stops
advice.
The phone having to immediately come through to you because it lets you handle it in your own time, and the customer knows you're going to handle it. It's all good.
That's wonderful.
I like it. All right. And we're going to round it up here as we finish up with Schema.
There were many different formats for what we call microdata. Microdata was this way of, you know, marking up little pieces and letting machines know how different parts of text meant different things. So, you know, this block is an address. This part is a telephone number. This is a contact detail. This is my web page. All of those kind of things. They came up with markup around them, microdata, and Schema is the most popular format of microdata. Google actually are behind a lot of it. They are a backer of it. They do listen to what people are doing and using. There is a whole community around expanding it, and they test things out and what works. And if it's really useful, it gets incorporated into the main body of Schema. But it is extensible. It's not magic, and it's not something you absolutely have to have on your site, but it can help a lot. It does things like it enables Google to have those fancy looking listings where, you know, it's able to understand more of the way your website goes together, so it knows that these pages are interrelating, that this is the most important page, that this is your contact page, that this is your telephone, and it can put those details sometimes directly into the search result.
Can you put that schema directly into your website with the HTML code, or if people are using WordPress sites, is there plugins that do that? And is it important to do that?
It's not going to suddenly, you know, make your page go to number one when it isn't in the top 10 right now. It's not going to do that. There are a lot of other things to do, and the content you write is going to be more important than the schema you then mark it up with. But once you've got your content, Schema then becomes more important because you've covered the basics. This is one of those game of inches kind of plays. When you're down to the game of inches, Schema becomes massively important. But when you're still on yards away, don't worry about Schema too much.
Yeah, so in Schema, if you're putting in your phone number, that kind of works back towards localization of market, doesn't it? Because it knows that that phone number is in a certain area. Or how about like when you're in 510, but you're actually in New York visiting you know, so I guess a lot of it's on the website and not so much on the personal device.
It doesn't always work that way though, because so many, remember Google deals with everything in the world. And it knows that even though you're dealing with this local store, when you call customer support, you're getting head office. Or maybe you're even getting a call center in India. And it doesn't care because it's still right. It still serves the customer. So don't think that localization of a phone number is necessarily going to be the signal to Google that you would think it is. Because you're thinking about your specific case, and Google's thinking about every possibility in the entire known world.
It's a big world.
Yeah. Sometimes we do get too caught up in our specifics and lack context, and Google's got a very different context to the rest of us. And it tries to adapt to the user's context in all situations, which is why we say user first, think of what they want to know. When it is going to affect user clicks, looking for a local number, then yeah, that may be a ranking signal. It may not, but it may be.
Interesting.
Good info. Good info for sure. These are clarifications that people need to know as well, because you don't want to trip Google up. We have limited out there, limited time and limited clients in some ways.
To get back to the rest of your question, Jeff, schema can be added to any site. It can be written into HTML. It can be done with inline script, so I can literally mark around the telephone number that this is going to be my telephone number. So in the code, I've got my content as normal, and then I can add the data streams around it to let machines know which parts mean what.
Great. So it's a wrapper.
What the plugins tend to do is just stick a lot of stuff in the header. And that's not as useful. What it does is it does things like those Twitter cards and Facebook cards. So that when somebody mentions your page on social media, it does the nice little image and it's got the right picture there. Well, whoopee-doo. And if social media is going to be a major part of your marketing, then that's important. But otherwise, it's doing nothing to help you rank in Google. Google doesn't care what you look like on Facebook or Twitter. Facebook have blocked Google from Facebook for years. They don't want them going through thousands and thousands and thousands of fresh posts every few seconds. That's not their thing.
Interesting.
Twitter,
I know that
Google pay to have instant access to Twitter. It's the only one they do. But why Google do that is they're much more interested in what's changing, what's new, what's happening.
Right.
Because remember what we said about the semantics, the meaning of words? Well, things change really fast. Remember, a good few years ago now, Hurricane Katrina. The day before that, if I searched for Katrina, I was probably either talking about an actress or the pop group Katrina and the Waves.
The waves.
Okay, and Google was giving me results for that.
Right.
Yeah.
But the day that hit the news that this storm was coming and people are searching for Katrina, they're not going to be so much interested in the pop group.
Right.
And Google needed to learn how to recognize things like that very, very quickly. Do you know how you get lots of information very quickly that something's happening?
Gossip.
You watch
Twitter.
Twitter. Yeah.
Also known as gossip. That's true. And and then you are so spot on with that too, Ammon, because that's actually where I'm watching a lot of things, just news-wise, because I don't want to see it filtered through my friends on Facebook. I want to see what's trending on Twitter. That's the first thing I go to. So that is very instant. You're absolutely correct on that.
Yeah, and it affects all kinds of searches because, suddenly if there's a rainstorm known and I'm suddenly looking for new clothing that's weatherproof, I'm not talking about windproof here. I'm looking for stuff for that. So all of these things matter. There's a whole field on the context of time and how things change over time in search.
Yep. Agreed.
What we'll know is seasonality, how the construction industry tends to all be around the summer, although a lot of the demand for it happens in the winter because you don't find out you've got that leak until the autumn or the winter and it needs fixing, but you really want to put all of your roof work to be done in the summer. You don't want your roof off in the winter at all. Yeah.
Yep. People outside working on it, you're absolutely right. Go with the seasonal too.
Yeah. So Google is aware of time and stuff like that. With Schema, you are putting context around your stuff. With the themes, it all tends to be focused on the header. It's somewhat useful, but it's not very useful. There's a lot of plugins for WordPress that add schema. It's only adding head schema. It's only making those nice little Twitter cards and putting extra code in the head that isn't going to do masses to help you.
That's good to know too, because the idea is keep those plugins down, to keep the bloat down, to keep the response time back up. Yep. And 3 seconds is too long, by the way. Try to have it under a second.
Oh yeah, we'll quickly mention that. When you're speed testing your site, it's great to go to one of these speed test things and it says, oh, it got it in 2 seconds, and that seems like it's quick to you. Actually, on those, you need to be under half a second, ideally, to be considered fast. But the way to speed test your site is go out with your smartphone to somewhere where you've only got 1 or 2 bars of signal, which happens to us all a lot of the time. Then try accessing your site, because that's the real world usage.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Again, if you're on the go and you're getting on Google to check something out, that you're absolutely right. I'm not sitting at home, so get on your mobile. Good call.
So always speed test on your phone with a bad signal, because that's how you'll really know what it's like for at least 10 to 20% of the people that are going to be viewing your site. You
want to see it in the not most ideal circumstances rather than when you're at home on your lightning fast internet, and not everybody has that. So you may as well get the real truth.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right,
even if they're searching from home, their kids playing 2 online games and their wife's streaming a movie at the moment, and their internet is garbage because it's being shared by so many people.
Right. And especially right now, everybody's at home all on the same line too. Well, that was a ton of great information. We're gonna wrap it up here soon. Any other parting words, guys, to keep us all in the know?
Don't miss next week is my parting words.
Yeah, exactly. Because creating evergreen content, that is a huge one too. And people have a hard time with that, don't you think?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, that's the worst part. They're like, oh, that's the noise. Every beginning of every week, I got to think some stuff up.
But the value of it is evergreen and forever there. So it's worth the thought.
It is. Absolutely.
Find your creative time moment and spend that time, allocate a little bit of time there to use that for developing that kind of content. Is what I do. Early in the morning. 4 o'clock in the morning, I'm thinking.
Yes.
4:30.
And it will. Yes, you are. Yeah. That's what you get when you're in construction. That's showing up at work at 7 o'clock is considered late to some people.
Lunch.
So it's considered lunch. Exactly. So, and the thing that you'll want to find out about is creating evergreen content will save you time in the end. Little FYI, that's our teaser for the week. So that wraps up episode 6. I'm Mia Voss. That's Ammon Johns. That's Jeff Bond. We will be back here next week. You'll be able to see all the other episodes that we had in the comments below. So we'll see you then. Thanks, everybody.